everybody. We are 2 Men in a Bible here today, and I'm Jeff.
I'm Joel.
Hello, Joel.
I'm Joel Hilden. That's Jeff Hoverson. Jeff Hoverson, Representative Jeff Hoverson, I might add.
The last name's revealed. Now you know the rest of the story. And,
with headphones on our head.
Yep.
We just want to let you know why these headphones are here. They help us hear ourselves, hear Jeff better.
Yeah.
We have a man in the booth with us, if you wish, Jason. And Jason also has headphones on, and we can hear him when he speaks to us. And
yes,
it makes it so much easier to hear. So
he's our technology
So
guy.
we look crazy, but that's the way it is.
Right. But he's the reason that we have these headphones and great microphones, and that
so we're just very grateful for Jason.
Oh, well, you guys look absolutely fantastic wearing them. It's like the latest fashion statement. You look gorgeous today.
Yeah, you bet. Jason works for KFLK Radio in Minot. So,
and that's what station we're on.
That's
88.1. So,
but we're also hopefully on other things. So we're getting there.
That's true. Yeah, we are, aren't we? We're doing
YouTube
and
other things.
It's kind of a new territory for us.
We don't even know what we're on and what we're not on yet. But
we just say, Jason, what are we on?
We want to talk a little bit more about communion.
Yes. We're going to kind of pick up where we left off last time. And last time I shared a little bit about my view of communion. Today, Joel has a little bit different view, but maybe not so much different. We don't know yet. But I'm really curious what Joel has to say. But the verse that we kind of used last time on communion was Matthew 26 through 28. And
we only got through 26, just so you know.
Yeah.
26,
right,
26.
Right, that's true. Took us a half hour to get through it. So while they were eating, Jesus took bread and gave thanks and broke it. And he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat, this is my body." Then he took the cup, gave thanks, offered it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for forgiveness of sins." So my big point last time was that is. We made a big deal out of that. So when Jesus says, "This is," of course, he's holding bread. He's not holding a layer of skin in his hand. He's not holding a chunk of flesh, but he's holding bread, and he's talking about that bread. He's saying this is what he's showing them. What's in my hand is my body. So I made the point that, in my view, I just take Jesus at his word. If he says it is, it is. And I don't really go too far in trying to figure out what that means. A lot of people think that word is means represents. But my question is, well, if it means represents, then why did Jesus say it is? Because he could have said it represents. So the view I have is pretty strict, literal view of what Jesus said about his word. But there's more to it than just that. That's about as far as we got last time, right, Joel?
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't even get to the blood or forgiveness of sins and that kind of thing. But after we were done, Joel shared an interesting take that I still want to learn more on your view, Joel. So what's your
What did
take?
I share?
Well, you said something about it was only on Passover.
Okay.
And I think we both agree that there's a connection to Passover in this.
Okay. So this is my view. By the way, I am a Gentile to the best of my knowledge. I say that because my grandfather said that his father and mother came from originally from Czechoslovakia. That's what everybody assumed. But he said that they came from Austria, and the reason they came from Austria and didn't tell anybody is because they could all speak Czech. And it wasn't cool to come from Austria. So it makes me wonder, is his whole entire family Jewish? And they were, snuck out of the country through Czechoslovakia.
Oh.
So as compared to through Austria.
Oh,
But
maybe you're really Jewish.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I have no idea if
Yeah.
I am or not.
Okay.
But that, on the other hand, is the Novak side of me, and my name is Hilden. So
Okay.
the Hilden side comes straight from Norway. So
Ufta.
yeah, Ufta is right. Yasher.
You betcha.
So, but why I'm bringing that up to you is because I believe that the scriptures were written by Israelites to Israelites. And I, through my whole life, asked the question about this communion business. Why does Jesus say these words? Let me see if I can find it. Doesn't say it in this passage.
Where are you at?
In Matthew 26:26.
Okay.
Jesus says, "Do this as often as you do it in remembrance of me."
Yeah.
He doesn't say that in this particular passage.
Well, the parallel passage is Luke, and I think Luke says to remember me, and this passage says for forgiveness of sins.
Yeah.
So in my view, that would be both would be true.
Yeah. So anyway, he does say those words during this time that do this as often as you do it in remembrance of me.
Yes.
So in my view of this passage of Scripture, because they're both true, this word is, I'd sort of agree with Jeff, but I think it's more of a symbol of, because Jesus is saying, do this, what you're doing today, in remembrance of me in the future. It's not the actual flesh of Jesus, the actual blood of Jesus. And I don't think Jeff believes it's the actual either.
No. Right.
But I just need to make that clear.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's
I appreciate that. Yeah.
a fair assessment of your view.
That would be a more Catholic understanding.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe that the bread is turning into flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in some respects, Jeff and I do agree on this matter of is. But where I would like to come from today is more from a Jewish perspective. And I see this whole event being just the Lord, just Passover. I really wish that we would not call it the Lord's Supper is instituted. That's what this Bible happens to say as a title for this particular passage. The titles, by the way, and verse references were not found in the scriptures at all. They showed up around 600 A.D. One man decided, and I'm grateful to him, by the way, for doing this, putting verse numbers beside all the verses and so on, and giving titles. But I don't think this is something that Jesus dreamt up or started. There was no start of communion that day. Passover had existed for 1,500 years. This is my view. 1,500 years, Passover existed. And Jesus is speaking to Israelites here. For sure, the 12 were there. We don't know if others were there or not. And Jesus, so that was at least 13 people there. Speaking of that 13 number, I think it's kind of interesting how we have used the number 13 as a bad number in our society.
Like Friday the 13th.
Yeah, Friday the 13th. You know that whole 13th business. They don't even have a 13th floor in many places.
Yeah, that was quite a superstition.
Yeah, it's a very strong one. But it makes me wonder sometimes. Jesus and his 12 disciples makes 13. So I just thought that was an interesting thought.
Pretty good package there.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose Judas maybe kind of cancels out the good part.
Well, except that Matthias took his place.
Oh, sure.
So,
yeah. Okay.
And in truthfulness, Paul took that place,
Yeah.
being the 12th apostle.
Right.
But back to Passover, Jesus sees this evening as Passover, and he's saying, as often as you do it. Well, I had the question: how often do we do Passover? Or communion, if you want to call it that? How often do we do that? And the scriptures never say it should be done daily, it should be done weekly, it should be done monthly, it should be done yearly. It doesn't say anything.
Right.
And yet it does, because this book is written to Jews or to Israelites. They all know that this particular event happens once a year on the day of Passover, the 14th day of Nisan. Nisan is the first month in the year. And it starts with the first full moon, when the fig tree sets forth its leaves. And so everybody knows when that date is, and it's the 14th day. The new moon is when the moon changes from waning to waxing. It's that instant, and it's an instant. It's a 1 second switchover. And that's when it starts, and 14 days later is Passover. Now, every Jew is to be, if they live in Israel, there's a stipulation here.
Mm-hmm.
If they live in the state of Israel, they are to be in Jerusalem. By the way, not every Jew. Every male 13 years of age and older are to be in Jerusalem on that day. And not just that day, but the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is a 7-day feast immediately following. And during that 7 days is the Feast of First Fruits. And in this particular case, it's interesting to note, we have made Friday, Good Friday, the day that Jesus died. But the Bible teaches that Jesus was presented to the people on Sunday, the first day of the week, and known as Palm Sunday. And Palm Sunday had to be on the 10th of the month, and then on the 14th day of the month, the lamb was to be sacrificed. The Passover lamb was to be sacrificed. So Jesus, therefore, was sacrificed, I believe, on Thursday. And then he rose from the dead again on Sunday morning, and which makes it the Feast of First Fruits. So the Feast of Fruits is always on a Sunday. It's always on the first day of the week, which makes then Pentecost always on a Sunday as well, and because it's 50 days later. And in our world, in our America, we would say that's 49 days later. But in the Jewish culture, they count the first day. So that Sunday is counted as day one, as compared to, we would start with Monday as day one.
Okay, so if I'm having a hard time following you, I don't want people to get too lost. Back to your question about whether you call it communion or Passover, I think is secondary, but we can call it Passover too. But I was just curious, is kind of one of the points that you're making in your view, just so I can understand, is that it should be done once a year.
Yes.
In Nisan is when, whether you call it communion or Passover, that event should be once a year.
Why I don't call it communion is because it is Passover. It is. Okay. It's not something that Jesus started that night.
Okay, could I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So now, in my understanding, I don't see him starting that night either. But how would this fit with you, that Jesus is fulfilling something? He's fulfilling the Passover.
I do agree with that.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, I do agree with that completely.
But so then, but you don't see a change taking place when there's a fulfillment then, or no?
Let me answer that. Good.
Okay.
Thanks for asking that question.
Yeah.
The change, there is a change
Mhm.
For 1,500 years, the Jews or the Israelites, excuse me for this, folks, but sometimes I get kind of technical when it comes to this word Jews and
It can get hard to
is-
follow. That's why I was trying to help.
Israelites.
Yeah.
I should always use the word Israelites. The reason I say that, I'll probably say this more often than once, but Jews are only those from the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin and 2/12 of the tribe of Levi. Israelites are for all 12 tribes,
Okay.
if that helps a little bit. Actually,
Well,
13
I
tribes.
just think, just to help you out, if we get too complicated with
Then it
the
probably-
topic of Passover and communion, we might lose.
Yep. Okay,
so
so
we just want to
thank
keep it
you, thank
easy to
you.
follow. Yeah.
So the Israelites have been celebrating this day for 1,500 years, since the day they left,
Right.
the day before they left Egypt.
Yep.
And they have been looking back to the day of their redemption from Egypt
Mm-hmm.
up to this date that Jesus is speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But this day that Jesus is speaking, now Jesus is saying, from this day forward, you're to do this Passover meal with the understanding that I am the fulfillment of this particular feast.
Yeah.
I am the bread that you've been eating all along.
Mm-hmm.
I am the blood that you've been drinking all along, or the wine, the bread and
Yep.
the wine.
Right.
I am that person. And in fairness to this whole scene, they have been looking forward to that Messiah the full 1,500 years
Right.
for that particular moment. And so for them to hear Jesus say, I am the bread and I am the wine, in the various ways here, they're not surprised. They're not
Right.
they're not like, oh, you can't say that.
Right.
But
can I ask you just to understand, in your view, do you see that when Jesus is doing this, that he is basically ushering in the new covenant? So now it's under the new covenant instead of the old. Is that something?
that's not something that you and I agree on.
Well, let's just go to the verse, because he says,
this
"This is
the
the
new
blood
covenant.
of the covenant."
Yep.
The new covenant. And so I'm just curious because I don't know that we're that far off, but I can't really know until I better
Sure.
understand your view. So
I see
that's why I got to
Jesus-
ask a question.
I don't see Jesus fulfilling Jeremiah 31 here.
Okay, could I ask a question on that?
Yep.
Let's not go to Jeremiah 31. If I could ask a question about, you pointed to the Passover. Okay.
Yep.
So in most of Christianity, whatever denomination you're from, I think understands that the deliverance, this Passover was a part of being delivered from Egypt.
Yes.
Right. So we
Yes.
all agree with that. Delivered from slavery. And it seems to fit to me, and I'm wondering if this fits with you in your view, that what Jesus is doing here is he's saying the deliverance from slavery of Egypt, that event was always pointing to something greater, and
Yes.
it is the deliverance with me at the cross and the
Correct.
empty tomb. So that is where the fulfillment is all taking place here, and that is why Jesus said, "Remember me," because ultimately what we're supposed to remember is Jesus delivering us from our sin.
I agree.
Okay, so that's how I see the difference between the old covenant and the new covenant, is that up until now they were always looking forward to their ultimate deliverance with the Messiah, but the remembrance of the Passover for the Israelites, they were told and retold the story of when they got out of Egypt, and now under the new covenant we are told and retold the gospel story of being delivered from our sin, our slavery to sin, from Jesus Christ, who really is, we're supposed to really ultimately remember him. under the new covenant. Is that similar?
I do agree.
Okay.
But I also need to share that I believe they are still teaching everything that they taught for those 1,500 years. They're still doing those exact same
Sure.
things going forward, all about Egypt, all about leaving Egypt, all about being delivered from Egypt, with the understanding all through those 1,500 years and these next 2,000 years that it all points to Jesus or the Messiah. And I do understand that the Jews or the Israelites of today don't recognize Jesus as the Messiah, but they do recognize in that whole story for 3,500 years now of the deliverance from Egypt as being a foreshadowing of their Messiah in the future.
So do you see that this event of Passover,
Yes.
which is the eating of bread and drinking of wine?
By the way, it's
Okay.
so much more than just those two.
I understand, but
Yep.
we only have 4
Yep,
minutes
yep.
left. So as far as if I can use the word communion, that whatever event we want to call it, where we're consuming
Yep.
bread and wine, do you believe that is something that every believer is supposed to do? Or are you trying to say that that's something that only the Jews today do, or only the Israelites today do? I'm trying to figure
I don't
out.
see Jesus starting communion here. I don't see Jesus.
How about continuing it, though?
What I'm trying to explain to you is that I don't see Jesus starting
Well, let me put it this way. Should we have communion
starting
today?
just communion.
Should a church have communion?
No.
Okay.
The answer-
That answers my question.
Yeah.
So
the
you don't
answer-
believe that we should have communion in church
At
at
all.
all?
at all.
Okay. That is a radically different
And I
viewpoint
don't
then.
believe in the
Okay.
Eucharist at all. I don't believe in communion at all.
Okay.
I believe that Passover is Passover,
Right.
and that Jesus
And
was
it's only for the Jews or for the Israelites.
well, yeah, but
Okay.
I do believe that if a Gentile, which I claim to be,
Okay.
if we want to do Passover, we could do Passover
But
with
we
them.
we don't need to.
But we don't need to.
Okay.
I don't see any need for us
Okay.
to do.
So we don't. So in your view, really, we don't. There's no need for Passover for a Gentile Christian.
for a Gentile Christian.
There's no need for Passover or communion or whatever,
all.
anything at all.
at all.
Okay. Wow.
Because Jesus wasn't starting this.
And
excuse
I
me for
agree
this
with that.
word. Excuse me for this word, but Jesus isn't starting the Lord's Supper institution this day.
Well,
that-
but isn't he fulfilling though something?
He is fulfilling
Okay.
it. Yes.
Well, that's different than starting. So
Yes.
fulfilling can change things, and it can expand things, right? I mean, if Jesus has fulfilled it, then it's
what
it's-
I'm trying
it
to
ha- it
explain
has
though is that
changed.
we Gentiles have come into this picture. We have assumed that we can just pull out 26 through 30 or whatever it is, 26 through 29, and we can pull out and we can start a new institution.
Well, I don't think that's what we're doing, though.
Well,
I think
but
I think we're just continuing and expanding the same
we've
thing.
we've actually done the opposite. We've not expanded. We've reduced it down to two things: bread and and wine. And I think we shouldn't have done that.
Okay.
Oh dear, I forgot to shut off my phone.
Well, okay.
Um,
Well, that's gonna that's probably gonna take us pretty far away from the topic. But the bottom line for you in terms of this passage and communion is that it's not really relevant anymore.
No,
It's not
true.
necessary anymore.
It's not needed for
It's not needed.
for Gentiles.
Okay, so but if you're a
But
natural born Israelite, it is needed.
Yes, and let me explain.
Okay,
Not needed for salvation, not
No,
needed for repentance.
needed
not-
for what?
It's just needed for the fact that they are to keep the 7 feasts of Israel every single year. They are supposed to do that every single
but
year.
that never ends then.
It never ends.
So fulfillment isn't the end for you then.
No.
Okay,
No,
So should they need to keep sacrificing lambs too then if there was a temple?
so we don't have time.
Oh, you're right. Okay, sorry. I took that off communion, but go ahead. Finish it,
Sacrifice
Joel.
is
There's
a
20
whole-
seconds. Last word's yours.
Sacrifice is a whole nother issue,
Okay.
and this isn't about that.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, thank
Wow.
you, everybody. We went through 25 minutes awful fast.
Yeah, great. Okay, Joel's view of communion. And thank you. This was Two Men and One
A Bible.
Bible. All right. God bless.